Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Leticia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are exploring the third quality to creating conscious relationships across our life, whether that's your professional relationships, your friendships, your family relationships, or your romantic relationships. There are three qualities that all relationships need to be successful and thriving, and to be a conscious relationship in the way that we define it over here at Relate Higher. Those three qualities are love, awareness, and intention. And on this series on the podcast, you're learning how to deepen into each of those three qualities so that you can show up in a conscious relationship and be in a position to enter into conscious relationships across your life. So the third quality is intention. And today's episode is all about how to bring more intention to all of your relationships. So there are 4 points that I want to share with you here today on the podcast on this subject. And at the end of the episode, I'll be giving you some coaching questions that you can use so that you can start practicing more intention across all of your relationships. So why is intention so powerful in relationships? Well, the first point I want to make here today is that intentions become the container for your relationships. So it's really helpful to feel that we have a container that is clear, that we all are aware of, that we're all committed to, and that we can go back to whenever we think like maybe what we're doing and how we're relating with each other isn't meeting those set of standards, that container we initially created and set for a relationship. This is really helpful because in most relationships, there is no container. It's just we're in a relationship. There are very vague intentions. There's no structure. There's very little commitments being made to one another. And even in the context of professional relationships, yes, we might know that the business objectives are XYZ, that your role as an employee in this team is XYZ. The team leader or the manager knows that their objectives are XYZ. However, we don't know what the personal intentions are of each individual within those dynamics. There's usually no conversation about it. Usually the employee doesn't feel like there is space for them to talk to their team leader about those intentions, and the team leader doesn't know how to facilitate these conversations. Therefore, we never know what either the team leader or the employee's real intentions are other than the business objectives. This creates a really stale relationship. It means that your employees, if you're in the team leader position or the employer position, feel like they can just go and leave, go somewhere else. There's nothing that really sticks them to this particular role and position in your company. This is going to become more and more of a problem as we move forward because the entrepreneurial industry is booming and people are becoming more and more aware that they can go and start their own business and with commitment be successful. And so why would they go and be micromanaged by a team leader or an organization who is not truly seeing them? There is so much to be said about being a part of a bigger company and not being the CEO of your business, which is required when you're an entrepreneur. But when those fundamental needs in the professional relationship are not being met by your employees will look elsewhere, and they may not even be aware of why they're looking elsewhere. So this is what we need to all become more aware of, more conscious of, so that people are more committed to the relationships that we set up professionally and in other areas of our life. And even if people still choose to go to other organizations and be in other relationships at some point in time, it means that the time that they're actually in the relationship with you, it is one that will be much deeper and much more effective because of the intentions we set during the relationship. So that's an example within a professional relationship. Within a romantic relationship, it's exactly the same. If we know why we're both in this relationship, if we know what we're committed to and what those qualities are of our relationship, then it gives us clear ways to review whether we're both actually embodying those commitments, those intentions throughout the relationship. And if we're not, let's have a look at why not. Is it because the intentions need to shift and evolve, or is it because our application of those intentions is not creating the result of whatever intention it was that we set in the first place? So intentions create this container and structure for all of our relationships so that we can have clear commitments with one another, so that we have a clear commitment with ourselves as to what effort we're putting into a relationship and why. I don't know if you've had this same problem, but a problem for me across my life in all my relationships has been wanting to give every single relationship my absolute all. This is not sustainable, and it left me feeling like I was just never meeting the standard that I wasn't even aware of in my relationships. I wanted to give everything to every single person in my business, in my friendships, in my family relationships, in my romantic relationships. This does not work. It sets you up for failure and for feeling unfulfilled constantly. And realize in this situation with my example, this was all about me. I was not even focused on what the other person was bringing to the relationship. I was just focused on what I was bringing to the relationship. And because I could never give my all to every relationship, I constantly felt like I was not being successful in the friendship, in the professional relationship, in the romantic relationship, in the family relationship. This was a pattern across all of my relationships. And this is how it usually works for all of us. Those patterns that show up in one area, they show up across them all, which is why if we start to focus on one area, we usually evolve all of them. So we can't give our all to every relationship, but we can be intentional about what this particular relationship is meaning for us. And we need to understand what the other person in the relationship really wants from this relationship. And then together with that clarity, with that focus, with that purpose, we create a sense of togetherness in the relationship. We create structure. We aren't overwhelmed anymore, which makes it actually easier to be in the relationship and even easier to have more relationships in your life. An issue for some people is because they feel like they have to give their all in all of their relationships, it means that they've only got very few relationships. Now, I'm not saying quantity means that you have more quality relationships, but what I am saying is when we feel like we need to give our all to all our relationships, it reduces our capacity to be in relationship with the amount of people. And then this can mean that we limit all of the needs we want met to those few people who don't actually have the same shared desire to meet those intentions. And it can be quite overwhelming to you and the other person in the relationship. You've got to be everything to everyone. This is how we typically approach our romantic relationships when we don't have relationships in other areas of our life that are also meaningful. So what we're doing here at Relate Higher is showing you how to make things easier for yourself so that it's easier, less weighty on you and also the other person in the relationship. And you'll be able to move throughout your relationships in your life feeling fulfilled because, most importantly, because of this approaching your relationships with intention, which is what being in a conscious relationship is all about. So we want to move with intention because it creates a container for our relationships. It gives us structure to something that is otherwise structureless. It allows us and the other person to be really clear on what the relationship is about, why we're in it, what we're focused on creating. This creates a sense of togetherness. It also allows for collaboration and powerful creation together, as well as the opportunity to reflect and assess whether something needs to change. So, the second point, the second reason for being more intentional in your relationships is that it also gives you and the other person or people in the relationship a feeling of more safety and security. Now, you'll remember at the beginning of the podcast, I spoke about the Relate Higher's definition for a successful relationship. That is a relationship that allows both you and the other person to support your purpose and potential. It allows both you and the other person to meet your relational needs and desires, and it allows you and the other person to feel safe and secure within the relationship. When we feel safe and secure within our relationships, it allows us to show up in higher ways, in ways that are more ourselves. Otherwise, we're coming for sure from protective patterns. We're not really being ourselves. We're probably not being very conscious of what we're creating. And it becomes this horrible experience for everyone in the relationship, this really diluted experience. And that's because we're operating from fear. So any relationship really needs to have safety and security be paramount. And that is what having a container, a clear container, we both know what we're getting out of this relationship and what we're committed to here. And we're both going to do the work to help move the relationship towards those values that we have both decided are what brings us together in this beautiful relationship. So that allows your nervous system and body to relax. It allows your mind to relax and not want to be overwhelmed by trying to do all the things or wondering, what are we even getting out of this relationship? Or just constantly doubting what the other person is thinking about the relationship. We've already dealt with this because we're being intentional up front. So that allows safety and security for both of you to go deeper into the relationship within the container that you're both aware of. Thirdly, being intentional in your relationships allows both you and the other person to be in alignment with your personal definition for relational success. So, in one of our earlier episodes, I took you through a process for revealing your definition for what a successful relationship is to you. And you might have set a definition in each of the 4 areas of relationships in your life: romantic, friendship, professional, and family. Or you might have set definitions for specific relationships. It doesn't matter what approach you took. What matters is that process has already started to give you information about what your relationship needs and desires are, and also about what it means to have relationships that support your purpose and potential. When we are being intentional in our relationships and we set intentions for the individual relationships we're in, we know why we're in them, it is much more likely that your relationships are then therefore aligned with your personal definition for relationship success, including what you need and desire in relationships, and including having relationships that feel like they're supporting your purpose and potential, because you're being authentic, right? You're showing up, you're doing the inner work to figure out, what do I really need in my relationships, and what is this particular relationship giving to me, and what is it giving to this other person. This allows both parties in the relationship to be in alignment with their personal definition for relationship success. Now, fourthly and finally, being intentional in your relationships gives both you and the other person or people in the relationship power and control in what you're creating and experiencing together. This is really important because when we're relating with anyone, we don't have power or control over the other person. So if we don't know what our intention is, and then we don't have any power and control over the other person, we're just leaving it up to, maybe today we get our needs met, maybe we don't. But if we combine being intentional, knowing clearly why we're in the relationship, having a clear container for the relationship, understanding what our commitments are to each other, and that coming from a place of authenticity that's aligned with your personal definition for success, that supports your purpose and potential, that comes from a place of creating safety and security, that meets your relational needs and desires, and all of this is also being fulfilled for the other person in the relationship, then we know that it doesn't matter that we don't have power and control over the other person, because we have both done the best we can to have power and control over what we're creating and experiencing together. So this is the most amount of power and control we can have because we both make clear commitments to each other. And then we can do the ongoing work to check in and ask each other, do we feel like we're meeting these intentions together in this moment or over the past 6 months? Have we? Like, what's your experience? I'll tell you my experience. Through that self-reflection, through that conscious communication and conversation, we're able to then work out, do our intentions need to be adjusted, or do we need to adjust what we're doing to embody these intentions? It will reveal new ways of working with those intentions just through this analysis. So that is what being intentional allows you. In summary, being intentional in your relationships allows you more safety and security, more power and control, a container for your relationships, and allows you to be in alignment with your personal definition for what relational success means for you. This is a much more fulfilling and successful way to approach all of your relationships. Now, let's talk about what some of those intentions could look like across the 4 different areas of our relationships. And then let's have a look at how being more intentional looks throughout the process of that relationship. So let's talk about romantic relationships first. Let's say one of the intentions we set in a romantic relationship is that we both want to be coming from a place of respect for each other throughout our relationship. And we can even apply that through the dating phase, through starting a new relationship phase, through improving and nurturing an existing relationship, through deciding whether to complete the relationship, through closing the relationship, and even through healing a broken heart, which are all 6 phases of the relationship cycle. We could apply that intention of respect for one another through all 6 phases. So at any point in the relationship, in a specific moment, or as we're moving into a new phase, or as we're reflecting on a chapter of the relationship, we can ask ourselves, hey, am I coming from a place of respect for myself and for my partner? This allows you to readjust how you move forward by asking that question. And it comes because we know what our commitment to each other is. It is to be respectful to one another. This intention was one that was set that allows us both to be in alignment with our relational definition of success. It allows safety and security. It allows a container for our relationship and the way we communicate with each other. And it gives us more power and control because we can keep assessing whether the way we're showing up is coming from a place of respect. And we can communicate with the other person, hey, that didn't feel like you were respecting me. How did it feel for you? Did you feel like it was coming from a place of respect? Let's talk about it. It's not about being right or wrong and being perfect throughout the journey. It's about being able to self-reflect and learn from each other, expand our awareness through having those intentions to analyze and to look at. Now, in a professional relationship, some of the intentions we set could be that there's a specific number 1 business priority that we're working on together as a team. And then secondly, with this particular relationship between you and one of the employees or you and your manager, there is also a very specific intention we've met that will help this relationship to thrive in support of that business objective. And maybe that specific intention for that relationship is the manager wants to be more hands off and the employee wants to be backing themselves in their decisions. So there's this employer or manager and employee relationship going on here. And in order for it to be successful, they've decided, look, as the employee, I'm committed to taking more responsibility and ownership of the decisions. And you, in order to support that, are committed to being more hands off. And so I'm the one that's asking for support when I need it. So as we move throughout that professional relationship and have our once a quarter or once every 6 months or annual review, we can both have a conversation about whether we feel like those intentions are being met. Are we actually focusing on that number 1 business objective? And are we also meeting this other intention we've set that supports our relationship to thrive in support of that business objective? knowing this helps you in the moment as you're making decisions about what to do each day or how you're having a conversation together. And it also allows you, as you reflect on the relationship, to go deeper into those initial intentions through reflecting on how you've been showing up so far and whether that's really been yielding that result of the intention you set in the first place. Now, in a friendship, you might have set an intention with one of your specific friends that you both want to allow each other non-judgmental space to be heard and listened to. This is really important and is often something our friends want of us unconsciously, but instead we go into advice and solutions and to responding to our friends rather than just listening to them and giving them the space to be heard. So if we know this at the top of our relationship with our friends, that we want for non-judgmental space to be heard and listened to. And as we go into a particular conversation with a friend, we can say to them, hey, do you want me to be giving you this non-judgmental space right now? Or are you wanting me to really just back you and be your cheerleader? Or are you really wanting me to listen to you and to notice where there could be any advice that I've got to you? So you might have intentions around those different roles we show up with in a friendship. And then that means you can actually ask ahead of time, well, which one are we working with here? And then also, am I meeting your intention right now? Or do you feel like I've really been giving you that non-judgmental space in our friendship? And if not, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what that would look like. So if we're judging ourselves and we have to be perfect, there's no way we'll ever have these conversations or even the self-reflection within. But when both you and your friend know that you're just learning together how to embody these qualities more deeply and that you're meeting each other where you are right now and how they need to be met right now, it allows you both to be messy and imperfect and learn as you go, but it gives you something to focus on working on, and so you will progress as you move throughout the friendship. Now, in the context of family relationships, you might set an intention to meet your family members where they are right now, rather than holding them to past behavior or previous dynamics of the past. This allows you and them the freedom to be themselves and to actually get to know them as they are now, rather than constantly projecting your perception of how they were in the past onto them and then having that done to you as well. So as you're interacting with your family members, perhaps you're noticing that you feel like you're being tied to a past identity. And so that allows you as the family member to have a conversation with, let's say it's one of your parents or one of your siblings, to have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'm not feeling like you're meeting me where I am at today. And I know that's one of our intentions. And so I just wanted to have a conversation with you about that so we can understand why I'm feeling this way. And you can also let me know more about where you're moving from and whether you feel like you are projecting onto me or whether you feel like you're actually meeting me with where I'm at today. This conversation will connect you and also allow you both to better embody your intentions, because it's not just about you, it's a relationship. It's about learning from each other. And so you will always learn something deeper about yourself through that conversation. So there you go. There are 4 examples across the 4 different areas in your relationship world as to how these intentions could show up and actually support you. Now, to wrap up this episode, I'm going to give you 3 coaching questions so that you can move forward with more intention in your relationships. Now, the first question is, what is the number one reason why I'm in this relationship? Now, you can think about this across relationships generally, if you're focusing on your ecosystem as a whole as you move through the podcast and the intentional process we're taking you through. Or if you're focusing on a relationship area, you can think generally about the area you're focusing on. Or if there's a specific relationship you're thinking of and working with, you can, of course, focus on that relationship. So what is the number one reason why I'm in this relationship? And does the other person know this? I think that this is a really illuminating question, because if they don't know what your reason is for being in the relationship, that tells you what one of the next steps might be, which is to have a conversation. And then finally, do I know why the other person in this relationship, what their number one reason is? And if you don't know, you can consider expand your awareness to start to make some guesses about what it is. And then more importantly, go and have a conversation with that other person. Again, if you're focusing on your ecosystem as a whole or on a specific area as a whole, as you move through this process on the podcast, think about the person you spend the most amount of time with, either in the ecosystem or within the area, and then answer these questions in relation to that particular relationship. And then I encourage you to go and have a conversation with the other person to let them know what your number one intention is and to find out what theirs is. And then to ask yourselves, do you both is that in alignment? Can you both commit to that becoming the container or one of the containers for your relationship? Now, if you want to know more about setting intentions in your relationships or working with the other people in your relationships to be more intentional, we're going to be learning more about that on the podcast as we move forward, especially as I introduce you to the Conscious Relationship Container, which is a tool that we've created at Relate Higher that allows you to be more intentional, to expand your awareness, and also to approach your relationships from love. And in conscious relationship coaching, this is the work we're doing with our clients. So if you'd love to know more about that, head to relatehigher.com/coaching. All right, my friends, I'll see you in our next episode. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Relate Higher, your go-to resource for learning how to consciously approach all of your relationships. To deepen your learning and practice, make sure you're subscribed to receive the Relate Higher community newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter sent to you every Monday, providing further coaching and education to support your relationships. Subscribe at relatehigher.com/community. And if you haven't yet left a 5-star review for the podcast, we ask that you please do that now so that this podcast can reach other listeners who also want to learn and practice conscious higher relating. Because remember, the more people who learn, the better relationships we all enjoy.